Hello, friends. Welcome to Storycraft. On this channel, you will enjoy world top stories. Let's view the video. The Nazi who built NASA. From Hitler's rocket corps to America's space dreams, in the smoldering ruins of post-WWI Germany, a young boy named Wernher von Braun dreamed not of war, but of space. As a teenager, he was captivated by the science fiction of Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, sparking an obsession with rocket propulsion. Yet destiny had a darker plan. In the 1930s, Germany was rising from the ashes of defeat, fueled by nationalism and vengeance. And in this brewing storm, von Braun's rocket experiments caught the eye of the German military. Though his heart longed for the stars, his rockets would first be used for war. The Nazis saw in von Braun a rare genius. He was quickly recruited into the Army's top-secret rocket program at Peenemünde, a remote facility on the Baltic Sea coast. It was here that the V-2 rocket, the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile, was born. Von Braun had made a deal with the devil, the Takey. V-2 was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Powered by liquid fuel, it could soar 55 miles into the atmosphere before descending at supersonic speeds, striking fear into Allied cities. London and Antwerp were among its targets. Thousands were killed. But this technological marvel was only one side of the story. Behind the scenes, Peenemünde became a place of horror. Thousands of forced laborers, mostly concentration camp prisoners, toiled and died under brutal conditions to build the Nazi rockets. Von Braun claimed he was a scientist, not a politician, but he knew what was happening. Even as bombs rained down on Europe, von Braun continued to refine his creations, dreaming of space exploration, while his rockets brought death from the skies. He had earned Hitler's favor, and with it came rank, resources, and the SS uniform he wore, despite later claims of reluctance. But as the tide of war turned and the Allies closed in, von Braun faced a new choice: loyalty to a collapsing Reich, or survival. And so, as Berlin burned, Wernher von Braun made a decision that would change history forever. Operation Paperclip, the secret recruitment. The year was 1945. Nazi Germany had surrendered. Europe was in ruins. But for the victorious Allies, a new war was already beginning, not of bullets, but of brains. The Cold War had taken root before the last shots of World War II were even fired. The United States and the Soviet Union were now locked in a silent race to seize one of the most valuable prizes of the fallen Reich: its scientists. Enter Operation Paperclip, a covert U.S. intelligence program designed to bring over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians to America. Among them, Wernher von Braun, the man who had once built rockets for Hitler himself. The operation was shrouded in secrecy. These men had Nazi pasts, some had even been members of the SS, but they possessed knowledge the U.S. couldn't afford to lose to the Soviets. Files were sanitized, histories were rewritten, and one by one, the men who had served the Third Reich were welcomed into America's most sensitive programs. Von Braun and his team were flown to Fort Bliss, Texas, where they began work on U.S. missile systems. Officially, they were technical experts. In reality, they were war prizes, brilliant minds taken from the enemy to power America's future. Many in the U.S. military and government were uneasy. These were not just scientists, they were former Nazis. But the lure of their expertise outweighed the moral cost. In the minds of the strategists, the Cold War justified the compromise, and the gamble paid off. Under von Braun's leadership, the U.S. would go on to develop the Redstone, Jupiter, and eventually the Saturn V, the mighty rocket that would carry mankind to the moon. Yet behind every launch pad was a shadow. Behind every countdown, a controversy. How much of NASA's glory was built on the backs of former enemies? How far was America willing to go to win the space race? Von Braun had traded one regime for another, but his past didn't disappear. It merely followed him into the spotlight, hidden behind stars and stripes. The man who once stood beside Hitler now stood beside presidents, and America, desperate to beat the Soviets, looked the other way. The Nazi who built NASA was now one of its greatest heroes. Wernher von Braun, the visionary with a dark past in America, Wernher von Braun became more than a scientist. He became a symbol, a smiling, suit-wearing genius who made spaceflight seem not only possible, but inevitable. With a charming accent and a brilliant mind, he was embraced by the media, the military, and even Walt Disney. Yes, Disney. In the 1950s, von Braun appeared in a series of television specials promoting space travel to millions of American homes. He didn't just design rockets, he sold dreams. Mars missions, space stations, lunar colonies. His imagination had no limits. And suddenly, neither did America's. But beneath the polished exterior, shadows lingered. Classified reports and whispered controversies surrounded von Braun's past. He had joined the Nazi Party in 1937 and held the rank of SS Sturmbannführer, an SS officer. At Peenemünde and later the underground Mittelwerk facility, thousands of slave laborers had perished under horrific conditions while building his rockets. Prisoners from the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp were starved, beaten, and hanged for minor infractions. Many never saw sunlight again. It was industrial murder fueled by innovation, and von Braun knew. Survivors would later testify that he walked among the corpses, ignoring their agony for the sake of deadlines. When questioned, von Braun offered familiar defenses. I had no control. I was just a scientist. I only wanted to go to the moon. But silence does not equal innocence. Still, the U.S. needed him. The Soviet Union had launched Sputnik in 1957, sparking panic across America. The space race was no longer a fantasy. It was a matter of national pride and military supremacy. And in the middle of it all stood a man who had once built weapons. For Hitler, he was given the keys to America's future. The man with blood-stained brilliance was now tasked with reaching the stars. Rockets for Reich, rockets for the stars. The same hands that had designed the V-2 rocket, used to flatten European cities, were now sketching the blueprint for Saturn V, the rocket that would lift Apollo 11 off Earth and land humans on the moon. It was poetic. It was ironic. It was controversial. By the early 1960s, Wernher von Braun had become the head of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. Under his leadership, the United States would build the most powerful rocket in history, a 363-foot-tall behemoth capable of propelling men beyond Earth's grasp. But the Saturn V was more than machinery. It was the crown jewel of a nation's ambition. And von Braun, the former Nazi, was hailed as the architect of mankind's greatest technological leap. He gave speeches to Congress. He dined at the White House. Children wrote him letters. Journalists called him a space pioneer. Few dared ask about Mittelwerk or the bodies buried beneath his success. Yet the questions never completely faded. In Europe, survivors of the camps began to speak out. In America, documents slowly surfaced. Investigative reporters started connecting dots the government had long tried to bury, but the public was torn. How do you judge a man who helped win the space race, but built his foundation on suffering? The moon landing in 1969 sealed his legacy. Neil Armstrong's iconic step was made possible by von Braun's Saturn V. America had beaten the Soviets. The stars had been conquered. And von Braun stood proudly among the architects of victory. But history is rarely black and white. Was he a visionary hero who reached for the heavens? Or a morally compromised opportunist who buried the past beneath rocket fuel? Even in triumph, his contradictions remained as towering as his creations. Legacy of contradiction, genius or war criminal. Wernher von Braun died in 1977. Hailed by many as a pioneer of space exploration. Streets, schools, and even craters on the moon were named after him. His dream had outlived him. But so had the controversy. To this day, his legacy divides historians, ethicists, and space enthusiasts. Some see a man who turned his back on tyranny and helped humanity touch the stars. Others see a man who never faced true justice for the lives lost beneath his rockets. Was von Braun redeemed by his contributions or haunted by his silence? In the end, the question remains, can the same man be both the father of spaceflight and the engineer of destruction? Thanks for watching. Subscribe our channel Storycraft for more interesting videos.